go. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Mysterious Bookshop. I'm Otto Penzler. I'm the owner of the store. And I'm happy to welcome tonight one of the great living writers in the world, Joyce Carol Oates, who I often like to describe accurately, I think, as the greatest living writer who has not yet won the Nobel Prize. Joyce and I have been friends now for about 20 years, is it, do you think?
Probably longer than that.
Maybe longer than that. Maybe we knew each other before, but I wouldn't use the word friend yet. It takes a little time. I've been honored to publish her for at least 15 years.
Yes.
And very, very happy to mention that we have a new book together called Night Neon, and which has a fabulous cover. And there's another book here called Cardiff by the Sea, the previous book that I published with Joyce, which also has a great cover. And it's an interesting fact about our covers. We have a very good art department. We pay them a lot of money. We work on it really hard. But the person who actually makes it as good as it is Joyce, who has a great artistic sense. I show her the covers, we look at them, we do all the work that we possibly can, and say, what do you think about our new cover? And she'll say, it's very nice. Do you think we could? And then we start fine-tuning it, and as a result, we have all of these little details that you don't even see at first until you start looking closely. And I've worked with Joyce.
This is unusual.
Yeah, and so I've worked with Joyce on pretty much every cover that we've done. On the back, we've done something that we never did before. There was a photograph of Joyce that she really liked, and we reached out to the photographer, and we used the full back cover as the author photo. And if I may, I'll show that to the camera. And to everybody in the room, look at that. Isn't that kind of creepy? Creepy.
Well, it's a creepy face, but it's
No.
it's an interesting poetic.
It's just, that was not the intention at all, to say that. But and that's not what I meant at all. It's a creepy photo. You know, it's a creepy photo. It fits with a creepy bar.
Well, I come from a sort of Gothic sensibility. This is really very conventional, very contrast.
Well, Gothic and creepy kind of, they have a relationship.
I like to say haunting.
Yes, haunting is a good word.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of books should have a perfect expression and some visual image. And if young writers, for instance, can choose the perfect image, it helps them with the title and then the focus and the unity. So I try to put novels together and story collections with a title and then an image that expresses it. And when I
Indeed you do.
and I teach creative writing and encourage my students to create their books with even back covers, because it's a whole phenomenon rather than just a collection of stories that are miscellaneous. It's things.
Yeah. You write many stories that don't get into books that I publish. You publish
Yeah.
them with your regular publisher. Just to, in case that's confusing to anybody, I publish a book. Joyce is generous enough to let me publish a book a year with her, but she also has another publisher with whom she publishes at least one book a year, and there was a time where it was more than that.
More mainstream fiction.
Yeah.
This is Mysterious Press.
Exactly.
But a lot of the stories I don't publish at all after the magazine publication because they don't fit into the theme.
Yeah, and we try to make sure that all of the stories in the books that we do together are unified by that sense of dread, terror, all those nice things that we like to share with you all.
Well, I think the emotion of mystery is very evocative in its title. writing with nostalgia. And it was thinking back to a time in our lives when something happened to us that was very profound, but inexplicable. And so we're led to the mystery as a genre, and we can read mysteries over and over because we never come to the end of mystery. So it's like an addictive genre. I mean, look at how many novels someone like Patricia Highsmith wrote, or P.D. James, or Ruth Rendell, or Rex Stroud. You know, a whole long list of titles because they never come to the end of the mystery.
Right. I mean, Simenon wrote over 200.
Yes.
And John Creasy, a name that may not resonate for too many people anymore, wrote more than 500.
Oh, really?
Yes. And Walter B. Gibson, who wrote The Shadow, created The Shadow, wrote 1 million words a year for more than 20 years.
That's a lot.
He
Million words.
Yeah, he was publishing a full-length, well, a short, about 55,000 word novel in the magazine, The Shadow, and that came out semi-monthly, and so he was at his typewriter. He would finish the stories like Dumas, who would write and write and write, then draw 2 lines under it and start the next book without taking a break. It's a kind of writing that most people aren't able to do.
Well, as I said, it's very tied in with nostalgia and when we were very young, and even before we had language, where the world was extremely mysterious. And so these people it's imprinted in their unconscious, something about mystery, so it never gets exhausted.
I've always thought of mysteries as being fairy tales for adults.
Yes.
They're fundamentally a battle between good and evil. And in most detective fiction anyway, the good triumphs over evil. In noir fiction, that's not true.
No, that doesn't really interest me much at all because it's too so blatant. You know, and probably all my stories it's very much a mixture, and people who turn out, particularly if I'm writing about women are usually victims in crime literature. But when I write about them, the women are maybe the aggressors. I mean, it starts out with a wonderful story, a wonderful situation where a woman actually kills somebody so that she's free at the end. The story is called Detour, like it's a detour in her life, but then she comes back to her own life.
Which is that's a very interesting story. It is not what you would normally expect to find in a collection of crime stories or mystery stories.
Published by you.
Published by me.
So I think that I sort of crept by your censor. Because Otto will read a story of mine, he says, I just can't publish the story because my readers will expect more coherence or whatever.
Oh, I never would have used that word.
Well, your readers expect
a crime story or a mystery story or
yeah, but there are plenty of stories
suspense
in here
story.
that are more gothic stories.
Right.
I sort of slipped them by the censor. But mystery detective fiction of the classic kind really has a kind of implicit contract with the reader that the mystery is legitimate and it will be explained. And maybe good will triumph. But anyway, the reader will know who did it and why, and so that's a contract, whereas with literary fiction there's no contract. You could read a story that the literary writer reads and not really know how it ends, or feel irresolute. So that's a big difference.
It is certainly a big difference. What I think of as the New Yorker kind of story, which is what are now taught in most MFA programs and so on, are frequently beautifully written. Every sentence is a gem polished and it's quite lovely. And at the end of it, nothing's changed.
That's actually not true. The New Yorker publishes all kinds of different fiction, including very idiosyncratic stories from ethnic Americans that are very startling and original. you're thinking of the fiction of the 1950s, which was a little more polished, but they don't, that's not really true
And the
anymore.
60s and 70s,
You know,
if I may say.
but I don't think it's so true now.
I don't read it anymore.
Well, there you are.
Which is not true, not entirely true. I
It's
do read.
possible that one of my stories, I can't remember.
I know that, I know you're often published there,
Yeah.
but I don't think
Maybe.
in this one. But in the next volume of Best Mystery Stories of the Year, there is a Stephen King story that ran in the New Yorker.
Right.
And that is not a typical New Yorker story, I would say. So, what do you think about this? What do you think about, what's your favorite story in this book?
Well,
I mean, we started with Detour, which is that weird story. And Miss Golden Dreams is also definitely not a
that's unusual.
customer. Why don't you talk about Miss Golden Dreams?
Well, I can talk about it a little bit. Miss Golden Dreams, 1949, you know who that was? That's the most famous pinup in history.
Marilyn Monroe.
That's Marilyn
Marilyn.
Monroe when she was very young.
Yeah.
It's a very famous pinup. You can kind of close your eyes and imagine it. She's very, very young looking with a sort of honey blonde hair rather than platinum blonde hair, very young. And she was just making the transition from being a starlet. She was Norma Jean Baker, and she would get her name Marilyn Monroe soon, but I think at the time of this photograph. It's, as I said, the most famous pinup in history, and it has generated millions of dollars. And you know what she got for it?
Nothing.
She got $50.
Oh, 50. Great.
But maybe $50, maybe not even, immediately, maybe after a while. So
That's
I have.
$50 back then, that's like
Oh, yeah.
60 now.
Yeah.
It almost cost her her career though, because it came out at a time in Playboy when she was already, she had her name Marilyn Monroe at that point. The big studios had contracts where the stars and starlets couldn't be in pinups, and they couldn't have
Right.
nude photographs, and so she just made that transition, but she did it only because she was desperate for money.
Somebody said about that photograph, she had nothing on but the radio.
She was so mistreated. It seems so sad, she's all over Twitter and all over social media. Her face is ubiquitous, and yet she herself died she probably was a suicide, or she died in a way where it wasn't clear whether she did commit suicide, but she was definitely not very happy at all. And there are some people, is it James Ellroy? Does he have a theory about who killed her?
The Kennedys,
He does, yeah, he does.
yeah, he absolutely is
He does,
convinced.
yeah.
Hmm.
Well, some people think that she was actually killed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Now, I did a lot of research for my novel Blonde, and definitely something happened, because when she was found in her bed, in her bedroom, the Los Angeles police were not allowed in right away. There was some other law enforcement was there, probably FBI. And then when the Los Angeles police came in, the crime scene, or whatever it was had been really cleaned up, and her telephone record was all expunged.
Hmm.
So somebody did something, but I didn't want to write about that in my novel. I'll leave that for James Ellroy. So this story is a phantasmagoria of a time where, it could be right around now, where you could take some DNA and you could replicate a plastic plutonium living being that would be a replicant of an actual person. Now, can we do that now? We can almost do that maybe with single cell animals.
Getting closer and closer.
Where you take the DNA from something,
Yeah.
a sheep, and then you could make a clone. So in my story, it's a few years in the future, and somebody has made a replicant of Marilyn Monroe, and she's alive. I mean, it really is, it's a living person. Recreated from the authentic DNA of me, and then she's at auction. So that's the idea of the story.
There was a recent book that Lawrence Block edited called Collectibles, and every story was based on somebody collecting something, and this story appeared in what was
Yes.
just collected in that book as the ultimate Marilyn Monroe collectible, which is Marilyn Monroe, essentially.
Yes, it was very exciting to think about this, just the science of it. And I talk about, I was paid $50 to pose for this photo, so it's a replica of that original photograph. And she is talking to the people in the audience who are mostly men, and she, well, there's some interesting things in here. I mean, it's not because I wrote it, but I mean, it's interesting just in terms of history. I was the very first Playboy centerfold in December 1953. Hugh Hefner had seen pictures of me. He had to have me as his first centerfold, guaranteeing success for Playboy, but he never got around to paying me, not a penny. So he used her image to sell the magazine, and he didn't pay her anything. Don't believe me? That Mr. Hefner didn't give me a penny? See, he bought the right to the photograph from the photographer for $500, and not from me. Which doesn't mean that Hugh Hefner wasn't crazy for me. He was. Oh, he was romantic. After I died, he paid $75,000 to purchase the cemetery plot right next to me. That's right. And when he died in 2017 at the age of 91, he was buried there, right beside me, his Marilyn. I know it's strange, it's hard to believe that Hugh Hefner would be crazy for me, paid $75,000 to be buried beside me, but never paid me a penny for the use of Marilyn. You just shake your head bemused. Men. See, Daddy, just the way I'm smiling at you right now. Bidding will start in a few minutes. Please take your seats. And evidently there are a whole lot of men there. Don't stand in the aisle staring at me. I am the actual Marilyn, I mean Norma Jean, and yes, I am alive, I'm a living thing. Would you like to love me, take me home with you? Yes. Desperate for love all my life, not just when I was Norma Jean, scrambling to be the photographer's model. All my life until the last night of my life, about which we don't have to speak, nor will you wish to inquire. For of all things, Daddy does not wish to know about his Marilyn, her final miserable days and nights. For I'd been taught by my abandoned, scorned mother's example that if a woman isn't loved, she is nothing. And then she goes on talking about herself, and now the auctioning, the bidding will start soon. Such fun we'll have together, Daddy. Don't listen to the rumors, Daddy. Some people are saying, jealous people, nasty, ignorant people, that I have been auctioned here at Sotheby's many times, that this is not the first time. Some people are claiming that fatal accidents happen to the wealthy collectors who have acquired me, sometimes within a few days. Falls down flights of stairs that result in broken necks and severed vertebrae, cardiac arrest, aneurysms, untraceable organic poisons that cause the liver to disintegrate. But these are false rumors and very silly rumors. Pay not the slightest heed to them, Daddy. I vow I will adore you, only you. I swear there have been no men before you, Daddy. You are unique. As I am lying in this inviting pose on the red velvet drapery with my perfect glowing plasta epidermis and perfectly white blonde plasta hair, so I will lie at your feet. I will be your beautiful bride. I will not ever murmur a word of sarcasm. I will not be impatient with you, though you are a foolish, doddering old man. I will be respectful of you. I will fawn over you as only a fawn can fawn. We have learned our tricks, young fawns and girls, for we have learned to survive. I vow, Daddy, I will never accuse you of not loving me. I will never accuse you of abandoning me. I will never accuse you of exploiting or betraying me. I will never accuse you of taking my money, hiding it in secret accounts. I will never collapse in hysterical tears, crying and screaming at you that I loathe you. The very sight, the very touch, the smell of you. I'm not a mad woman. I don't cry ugly tears. When I cry, I'm very fetching. I'm not a nasty woman. I do not want to be your equal. I adore you. I'm not bitter. Bitter would melt in my mouth. Nobody wants a broody, teary playboy centerfold. I can't blame them. I wouldn't myself. Could you guess seeing me here so young, posing in the nude on folds of red velvet, so sweetly smiling, so unperturbed and unaccusing, that when in a decade I'll be called the sex symbol of the century, and a few years after that I will be dead? No, but don't think of that, not yet. You haven't brought me home yet. Our honeymoon has not even begun. So I'm going to move on a little bit here and get to the end of this. Marilyn will be sold to the highest bidder. Never any doubt, that's the promise. Marilyn will come into the possession of the highest bidder. Love me, Daddy, I will love you. Every man who'd ever loved me abused me, but I'm not bitter, just a fact. You will be the exception, but you will not abuse me, will you? As you will not topple drunkenly down a flight of stairs, fleeing in terror from your plastiplumian luxe bride with the hard clamping arms and legs. You will not fall screaming, thumping against steps and break your neck. You will not suffer a heart attack in our marital bed. As the hard clamping arms and legs grip you like a python, you will not die of an untraceable organic toxin from the dazzling red lipstick smile, because you are special. And yes, you deserve me. Blonde bombshell who's also girl next door, ever alive exactly as she was in 1949. Precisely replicated chromosomes. Identical cells down to the teeniest, weeniest organelle. See, I'm breathing, my eyelids are flooding, my gaze is fixed upon you. Tell me what you like best and I will do it, and do it, and do it. I will keep every secret of yours. I will suck you dry, the loose, flabby sack of you eviscerated, and your brittle bones turned to soup. And you will scream in ecstasy, I promise. Remember, Daddy, all you gotta do is make a bid for Miss Golden Dreams and keep bidding. Don't ever stop bidding. Up, up, up until your rivals fall behind defeated. The lowest estimate for Miss Golden Dreams at today's auction is only $22 million. And the highest, Daddy, there is no highest. I don't know how you published that story.
What was I thinking?
Well, it's a little different.
It's just such a good story, and there's an underlying crime to the whole thing.
There is a crime, yes, that's
So,
right. The crime against Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I was once interviewed by the New York Times, and they asked me, what's the last great book you read? And I picked Joyce's Blonde.
Oh, thank you.
Because it really it's a masterpiece. What made you become so interested in Marilyn Monroe? I mean, you're writing a short story, you've written a novel, and it comes up in conversation from time to time. You bring her up.
Well, it's actually kind of an interesting origin, because I wasn't particularly interested in Marilyn Monroe, but I saw a photograph in a book probably of the mid-century, a photograph of this beautiful, but not glamorous, just a very pretty girl with brunette hair, and she was 16 years old, and it was Norma Jean Baker. So I just saw that picture, and she looked a little like girls I went to school with, even like my own mother a little bit. You know, it's like 1946 or whatever that was. And I just got overwhelmed with the idea of writing about this almost ordinary, pretty girl, and how she becomes transmogrified into Marilyn Monroe and, you know, the Andy Warhol mass-produced images. And how do you get from that to that? So that was the genesis.
Yeah.
And then I looked into the Red Scare and the McCarthy era and the history of that era, like the World War II and the end of World War II, and the rise of the Kennedys. There's a good deal about the Kennedys in my novel, and Arthur Miller and Joe DiMaggio. And sort of looking at like the sports world, and then Arthur Miller, the literary world, and then the Kennedys, political. So it became like an echo. And I'd love to do something like that again, but I can't find such an such an all-engrossing image.
Yeah, well, she was unique. I remember when I was a kid, and I thought she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and Joe DiMaggio was a great hero to me
Yes.
as a Yankee fan growing up in the Bronx. And when they married, I felt this was like the most wonderful match
Yeah,
made in heaven.
yeah.
And of course, it was anything but. They were totally not suited for each other.
Well, they weren't suited, but he was ultimately he helped her later on in her life.
He died loving her.
Well, you probably know that when she did die, she didn't have enough money in her bank account for a proper burial. So her body, this beautiful body, was sent to the Los Angeles County morgue. And while it was, you know, the body that's so famous and the beautiful face, she was photographed just lying on this slab. It's so awful. I mean, that really makes me want to cry, because she didn't deserve anything like that. But Joe DiMaggio came forward and he paid for her to have a burial
Yeah.
and a grave.
And delivered flowers to the grave on a
And-
very regular
right.
basis. Yeah.
But it's such a scandal that somebody that exploited ends up in the morgue, you know. Which, you know. So all those things made me want to write about it.
I think we should ask if anybody has
Yeah,
any
some
questions that they would like to ask about that or any of Joyce's books or anything else.
Thanks for coming.